The government have been saying we've got to do something about immigration, we're going to curb things, we're going to deal with foreign students. But foreign student numbers are at historic record levels.
Yes, new data from the ABS shows a staggering 200,000, over 200,000 foreign students entered Australia in February alone. And some estimates are now saying that there are 700,000 foreign students in Australia, another 100,000 on bridging visas, and a further 25,000 who are currently appealing their visa before the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. So in total, that brings us to 825,000 foreign students in Australia in the middle of a housing crisis. Now, this is perfectly consistent with Labor's record on migration because, as we know, in their first 2 years in government, they brought in 1 million extra migrants. In that time, we only built 350,000 houses, by the way, but that is a side note, and that's 70% higher than any other period on record ever. Now, I, as a recent graduate of Sydney University, have a lot of thoughts on foreign students. I'm sure my alma mater will not be thanking me for this right now, but I think the challenge with foreign students is that our universities have become so overly reliant on them to the point that we have the highest percentage of foreign students in our university systems than any other OECD country. At Sydney University, it's about 50% of students. In some postgraduate courses, it is way higher. Now, you have to think, apart from the obvious impacts on the housing crisis, what does this do to education standards when around 1 in 12 foreign students admit themselves that they do not speak good English? So it leaves you with a few questions. How are these people even passing courses? And then what does it do to the student experience on campus? Because I'll tell you what happened at my university. Essentially, the classes would separate into domestic students and international students. And in some classes, as a domestic student, you are the minority. So rather than enhancing this diverse multicultural experience, as the universities want to make you think, what it does is actually ruin the student experience. It ruins campus life, their clubs are much less active, and people basically segregate into racial groups, which is the opposite of what we should want for our universities. So we need to rein this in ASAP. And I personally think, despite Labor's 18 months of talk on course caps, they're actually making no significant cuts to student numbers. Their cap is just bringing the numbers back to 2023 levels, which is a joke. We need to be setting hard caps, 25% international students max per course.
And the problem is not just the number of students coming in to study, but the fact that so many of them stay on in the country after their study has finished. I think you said 100,000 former students on bridging visas trying to gain permanent residency or other visas. And then there's 25,000 additional former students who have been told to go but are now using the courts appeal after appeal after appeal in order to stay in the country. So the government's got problems at both ends, too many coming in and not enough leaving. But as well, it feeds into the charge that's been made about universities. They've departed from their mission and they've become all about bums on seats and dollars. I had to laugh when a couple of weeks ago the Chief Executive of Universities Australia made the serious argument that money being directed towards roads should be redirected towards universities for research. And he actually said, quote unquote, voters would rather a booming economy. He didn't quite explain how more university students are going to create a booming economy, but he said voters would rather a booming economy rather than a shorter commute, which really demonstrates the tin ear of our universities, who continue to bring in more and more foreign students to line their own pockets, seemingly oblivious or uncaring and unconcerned about the impact it's having on everyday Australians, i.e. the housing crisis.